Let's make a few things clear. Our recorded history spans roughly 6,500 years before it enters obscurity. From there, we can only make general assumptions based on relatively flimsy evidence. Most of the time, these assumptions are made to fit within the established paradigm. Pre-existing notions of the development of human beings contaminate the evidence presented to us, for we project our assumptions onto the past, rather than letting the evidence speak for itself. It is no coincidence that civilizations arose simultaneously around the world after the end of the last ice age, a period of time that was brought to a sudden and catastrophic end. New evidence points to a comet impact upon the North American ice sheet 12,500 years ago. That which caused a massive meltdown, flooding the many areas of the world and submerging many others permanently as water levels rose up to 400 feet. This catastrophe, which is now known as the Younger Dryas Impact Event, wiped out the megafauna of North America, all of which were previously thought to have been hunted to extinction by human beings, a theory that is now obsolete in the light of this new evidence. Human beings have dealt with this worldwide catastrophe, given the fact that the fossil record shows that human beings at this time were the same anatomically to modern human beings, the same brain shape and size, and capacity for intelligence. This worldwide flooding now makes sense of the traditions and religious stories of the world, all of which that retell a natural catastrophe that has caused a massive flood, wiping out the civilizations of old. You can go ahead and research these myths and traditions and make comparisons revealing their underlying meaning. that human beings rose in power to match that of the so-called gods, and were ultimately cast down. The most famous of all these flood myths is Plato's story of Atlantis. Plato gives a particular date for the flooding and destruction of Atlantis, 9,000 years before the age of Solon, his ancestor, whom of which was born in 630 BC. In other words, his dating for the flooding of Atlantis is 9630 BC. This date is in direct alignment with Meltwater Pulse 1b, the second largest flood that ultimately terminated the Ice Age. Now, to put things into perspective, in the earlier stages of societal development, human beings passed down oral traditions that, over the accumulation of generations, form into myths, traditions, and religious tales. Different societies with a different set of reference frames will interpret natural events based on their own understanding of reality. So these stories are actually based on natural events. In this case, the series of catastrophes that brought an end to the last Ice Age, and brought an end to the once advanced civilization that is now lost from memory. When taking the time to gather and investigate all the pieces of information available, one would come to the same conclusion that we are a species with amnesia. The point of this documentary, however, is not to prove the existence of the lost civilization, but to reveal the human story in a holistic sense that has never been told.
We do have some of the information from this wiped out civilization because, and it should be added, not everyone was killed by the comet.
No, not everyone was killed.
Hunter-gatherers were okay.
Just as we live today in a world where there are hunter-gatherers in the Amazon who don't even know we exist. There are hunter-gatherers in Namibia who live a full hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They know we exist, but they choose to perpetuate their lifestyle. They are coexisting with an advanced civilization, so-called, ours. And I suggest it was exactly the same during the Ice Age, that there was an advanced civilization on the planet, as many myths and traditions suggest, that it coexisted with hunter-gatherers. But who survived the cataclysm in the largest numbers were not the members of the advanced civilization. Just as I believe we would not survive such a cataclysm today. We're not psychologically prepared for a disaster. We're the spoilt children of the earth. We are used to having clothes on our backs, roofs over our head, plentiful supplies of food in the supermarket. You stop that dead in its tracks, and within a matter of weeks there would be traumatic shock and chaos and disorder. People from advanced civilizations actually do not have survival skills. But people who are hunter-gatherers are masters of survival. So it's not surprising that it's the hunter-gatherers who survived in the largest number. But what I evidence in this book, what I document in this book, is that there were survivors of a more advanced civilization, and they took refuge amongst hunter-gatherers. And they then tried to teach them what they knew and hoped to recreate or restart their civilization again.
Plato's story of Atlantis was passed down from him from his ancestor Solon, who himself passed down the story from earlier sources. 12,500 years ago, our advanced worldwide civilization was brought to an end by a series of catastrophic events that lasted up to 2,000 years. The intriguing part about this story, other than its correlations to the Ice Age meltdown, is the social and political message. The so-called Atlanteans were the apex of human achievement. Our entire genetic evolutionary story led up to them. They maintained their ties to the circle of life and revered this planet, as well as the universe, as a sacred, intelligent deity. Intelligence displayed in the formation of natural laws and fractal geometry. They recognized the truth about the nature of reality and dedicated their culture to that truth. The truth is that we are all the universe experiencing itself subjectively, and that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of the universe, made possible via the causalities involved with the formation of reality. These people, whom we can refer to as the Atlanteans, recognized this truth, and reached a level of scientific sophistication that surpassed our own. Their culture was not tainted by ego-driven fantasies like materialism and profit. It was the golden age of humanity. However, this all changed. The people of Atlantis would later on forget their ways. A paradigm shift into materialism that affected the later generations. It is said that these Atlanteans would then go on taking part in slavery, imperial expansion, and war, imposing their views and ways onto others with fire and blood. It was during this time that a comet devastated the planet, destroying that civilization. There were two categories of survivors: the scattered people of the world, and the people who took shelter, preserving their technology and knowledge. Unfortunately, this group of survivors did not agree to the same goal. We can categorize them as the prescients and the manipulators. The prescients sought to reboot civilization, bringing humanity back to its once golden age, while the manipulators used their superior technology to subdue the now primitive tribes of the world, manipulating the people into worshipping them as gods. This led to a whole series of problems for the prescients, who did not know the severity of the situation. The only other surviving remnants of this advanced civilization exists in the form of symbolism and megaliths. One prime example of preserving knowledge from this time can be found at Göbekli Tepe, where anomalies are still being discovered to this day, such as the astronomical correlations to the galactic bulge and the galactic center. The hieroglyphs found at Göbekli Tepe etched onto the megalith stones were deliberately covered and buried 12,500 years ago, as if someone was trying to preserve knowledge by hiding it from those who would desecrate it. Knowledge pertaining to the comet impact that wiped out the lost civilization, a story that has been forgotten by the later generations, and history became legend, legend became myth, and some things that should not have been forgotten were lost, and history as we know it plays out from there. The scattered cultures of the world formed over the many generations, and they all carry down traces of this lost knowledge in the form of iconography, architecture, design, as well as myths and traditions. Despite this, they have all failed to retain the wisdom of the lost civilization during its golden age. All operating on the directive of dominance and the maintenance of power, traits that exist in the lower stages of human development. Traits that we have already dealt with and phased out during the golden age of the lost civilization. Without a unified motive to reboot humanity to its prime glory, the humans of the world were blind in the dark. Some maintained the cultural traits of the golden age of the lost civilization, while others inherited the greed and maliciousness of the manipulators, leading to the formation of dynasties, royal families, kingdoms, and empires. The accumulative actions of all these civilizations have led to the world that we know today. People have stated that Western civilization is the greatest achievement of mankind. In fact, whether or not they are willing to admit it, all countries are following the Western model. Despite the obvious differences in their methods of governing, they all divide their people into classes of society and measure one's success by their wealth. So it can be said that all societies on the planet are operating under the same societal paradigm. Mind you, I am a Westerner, and because of this, I will focus on the society that I am from. But the same said here can be applied to all societies. The world that has been presented to us since birth has been established in our minds as right and normal. However, the world that we have created is upending the natural order.
The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one.
Much like the Atlanteans during their decline, we pride ourselves in our technological advances, imposing our way of being onto those who live amongst nature, seeing them as backwards and primitive. Not only this, but we have the audacity to claim that we are a righteous society. All the while, our governments are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands, and in some cases, millions of innocent civilians. Our civilizations exploit the earth, ripping her bare for her natural resources, in which our societies waste in our linear economy, a take-make-and-throw-away model that operates on the assumption that the earth is limitless in resources. And, like a virus, when we have depleted those resources, we will spread to another planet and repeat the process.
And our governments and the huge, gigantic corporations that really run the world are so invested in spreading fear and hatred and suspicion. Fear, hatred, suspicion, again and again and again. These messages are just churned out at us, dividing us, separating us, setting us against one another.
The human race has been divided into factions that we call countries. These factions are the result of the accumulative actions that led to their formation. The wealthiest of these factions have been pulling the strings and are ultimately the ones pushing humanity into a self-destructive direction. It may very well be that the ruling elite, the so-called Illuminati, control the entire planet, but it's more likely that the world is divided and controlled by separate secret societies that pull the strings behind the scenes. Secret societies that are operating outside the realm of politics. They create a game that we all play, and they invest tons of resources into maintaining the illusion that is our system.
That's why they pay athletes these fantastic salaries. I was listening to the radio the other day. They just contracted to pay one player on one team $6 million a year. Can you believe this?
And why is that?
It's the Roman circus. What does the emperor do when the people become restive, and when the people are asking questions, and when the people don't like the policies of the emperor? He sends them to the circus. He creates a circus. He builds a giant coliseum.
These secret societies consist of people from different bloodlines of royalty, competing over the dominance of the planet and all the people on it. When viewing recorded history, you will find their influence in every major event that pushed humanity into the direction that it's been gearing towards. And even still, the truth of these events are obscured by the bias and social programming of the historians. History is written by the victors, and if you want to control the people, you need to control their frame of reference. The frame of reference, as I've said many times on this channel, is based on the information one attains through life by experience. It is the perspective in which we view reality. So, by filling the minds of the masses with false information, the people will no longer know themselves, and people who do not know themselves are easy to control, as history shows.
Matrix is a system, Neo. That system is our enemy. But when you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. You have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress?
I was.
Look again.
The entire cultural paradigm acts like the Matrix. The human race blindly accepts their social paradigms without question, maintaining the illusion that we agree to be the blueprint of our reality. The corruptive effects of our cultural paradigm is truly apparent among the young people, children, teens, and young adults. Children are the least corrupted among human beings simply because of the fact that they are fresh out of the source. Unfortunately, our society implements continuous indoctrination onto the children from the moment we introduce the child to distorted societal programming. Their mind is corrupted. We introduce toys and material objects to the children to distract them from the affairs of the adult, but the child is now being taught about possessions. We place fresh minds into a distorted environment, and the minds respond accordingly by behaving within a specific set of parameters. This is how the brain works during its early stages of development. It adapts to the parameters that it's placed in, molding itself in accordance to the environment. In this case, the society it's placed in. If we were to live in a society where the parents did not have to direct their attention to mundane tasks, we can maximize the connection they have to their children. The children would not fight over material objects if they are exposed to a limitless world around them that does not care for material objects. And yet, we ignorantly raise children in accordance to the societal programming bestowed upon us, a way of living that we think is right and normal.
The entire money-structured and materialistic-oriented society is a false society. We have the brains, the know-how, the technology, and the feasibility to build an entirely new civilization.
You believe that we teach competition, that it's not bred into some...
Competition is dangerous, socially offensive, considered right and normal, because you are brought up to that value system. Suppose your brain said, I'm the most important organ, and the liver said, I am, and I want to go a free enterprise system. You'd rot away in a month if every organ of your body went out for itself.
In your society, there are no mayors of cities.
There are no mayors, there are no politicians, and you go to a university whether you can afford it or not. The choice lies with you. The stupidity of a nuclear arms race, the development of weapons, trying to solve your problems politically by electing this political party or that political party, that all politics is immersed in corruption.
Why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
It doesn't have to be the end of the world. It doesn't have to be the end of human civilization. We have choice. The people of the world need to take power back into their own hands, to take sovereignty over themselves and their own consciousness.
Each one of us is a spark of consciousness, a piece of this universe, experiencing itself and self-actualizing. Rather than allowing yourself to be another barcode, another cog in the machine that destroys the planet, why not take part in the greatest story ever told? Despite the horrors that have been committed and continue to be committed, we have a better chance to change the world, now more than ever before. Fragmented bits of the comet that wiped out the lost civilization still lingers in the Taurid Meteor stream, which the Earth passes through twice a year. It is believed that we will once again be destroyed by another comet impact, but it doesn't have to be.
Aside from finding out who we are, there's obviously trillions spent on military technology. You think we should be spending on some kind of protection, certainly from...
I certainly do.
Things that can destroy us.
I certainly do. It's one of the things that frustrates and annoys me, that we can create massive scientific endeavors. We can raise enormous amounts of money to fund weapons of mass destruction so that we can invent ever more sophisticated ways to murder one another as a species. But when it comes to protecting the Earth from environmental threats, when it comes to protecting the Earth from, for example, a comet impact, we're not interested at all. And the thing is that we could do that, and the key point that I really need to make is that that original giant comet that broke up into multiple fragments that caused a cataclysm 12,800 years ago, huge bits of it are still in orbit in the Taurid Meteor stream, which the Earth passes through twice a year. And it is regarded by responsible astronomers as the most grave collision hazard facing the Earth at the present time. And it doesn't need to be gloom and doom. All we need to do is take all that ingenuity, all that money, all that power that we now put into weapons of mass destruction and turn it towards protection of the Earth. Because these events, when they happen, are world-changing. Do we really want to see the end of our civilization? Because that's what's in the offing.
The work of the Aquarian Age of the next 2,000 years is to create a cosmic civilization. See, that's our destiny, and that's our work. That's the great work. You see, part of our destiny is to expand to this cosmic consciousness, literally. And as we expand outwards, as the Masonic masters understood, we're also expanding inwards. The outer journey has a reflection which is an inner journey as well.
When I've asked shamans about the sickness of the West, they say it's quite simple. You guys have severed your connection with spirit. Unless you reconnect with spirit and do so soon, you're going to bring the whole house of cards down around your heads and ours. And rightly or wrongly, they believe that ayahuasca is the remedy for that sickness. And many now are being called to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca, and ayahuasca shamans are traveling throughout the West, offering the brew, often under the radar, often at personal risk, to bring about consciousness change. And it's true that the message of ayahuasca, the universal message, is about the sacred, magical, enchanted, infinitely precious nature of life on Earth and the interdependence of material and spiritual realms. And it's impossible to work with ayahuasca for long without being deeply and profoundly affected by this message.
We confuse happiness with status, and we confuse ourselves as living organisms which are one with this whole universe with something we call our personality.
This is not some fatalistic thing that I'm presenting here, not at all. It's the biggest opportunity ever presented to life on Earth. Earth is living, our Earth is orbiting the sun within cosmic swarms that have repeatedly pummeling the Earth and have probably brought the human species close to extinction more than once. Had we continued building upon the momentum of our space exploration program of the 60s, we would already have created the cosmic shield.
The impending comet impact grants an opportunity for the world to put aside their differences and come together to face the common threat to us all. It will be the first time that the world's nations will collectively work towards saving our species from total annihilation, giving us a chance to work towards a new way of being. A way of being that dissolves all the artificial constructs that we give power to, something resembling the late Jacques Fresco's design for society and civilization. Fresco suggests that the mind shapes reality based on a reference frame, and collectively, we agreed upon a way of living. This is how cultures and societies are maintained. So, by introducing concepts that render the current model of living obsolete, the rest of humanity will follow through, as they have every time a paradigm shift has occurred. Jacques Fresco's model for civilization is not only efficient, but it adheres to the natural order of this planet. It makes sense to construct our cities in a format that maintains the equilibrium with the surrounding environment, considering the fact that we are nature, part of nature. Also, considering that we are all genetically related, it is useless to view each other as enemies. We are all part of the family tree, the Earth family tree, the genetic family tree. The threat of this impacting catastrophe may yet grant us with the opportunity to unite as one people, fulfilling the efforts of all those that came before, who sacrificed their lives for the greater cause.
Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever.
Each person's actions ripples through time until they all coalesce at the critical moment that decides the outcome of our species.
I don't know whether we're going to face some terrible global catastrophe, but I do remember what all the ancient texts say. There isn't a single flood myth, there isn't a single story of the destruction of past civilizations that don't implicate humanity in the story somewhere. Our own behavior, what we do, is part of what we're bringing down on the world right now. What we are manifesting in the world, that is what is coming towards us. We are the authors of this thing, and we can change the story if we want to change it. I firmly believe that. Are we looking at the traces of a forgotten episode in human history? I think so. I think that's what's going on here. And because we've forgotten it, because we are a species with amnesia, because we are so much a mystery to ourselves, perhaps it's because of that we're so lost and so troubled today, so haunted by the sense of something missing, something that we need to know about ourselves. For the ancient Egyptians, the essential mystery of human existence concerned our spiritual essence, that we are participating in this theater of experience that we call life and the world in an immense endeavor aimed at the perfection of the soul. I've talked with shamans in the Amazon, and when I've asked them, what do you think is the problem with the world? What's the problem with the West? They say it's very simple. You've severed your connection with spirit. You've cut the link. And you have to restore that link if you're going to move forward from here. You can't move forward from the place you're in if you don't restore the connection to spirit. And that seems to me the most the most fundamental task that all of us now face. Not these exterior trappings of power that have brought such horror and misery to the world. This is the moment of crossroads that we stand at. None of us can effect changes on a macro level. It's impossible to do so. But we can make changes on a micro level. We can make changes in our own lives. We can make changes in our immediate surroundings. Changes for the better, changes driven by love. So overwhelming is the notion of global destruction. No, I can't stop that, but I can stop what I'm doing to contribute to it. And if we all do that, then I believe a huge change in consciousness will come, and the world can move on, and we can look forward to a future for our children and our children's children, and once again bring this bright, beautiful, jewel garden of a planet, bring it back to the place it should be in our lives.
And if you want a world without war, without hatred, without crime, and without stupidity, it can be arranged. If we consider at some time, which society will at a later time, I hope it would be sooner, that all of the earth become the common heritage of all nations. All of the resource of the earth, the common heritage of all nations. And if you believe in God, if you understand the teachings of all religions, there are no property lines in heaven, no banks, no personal positions in which one person is elevated above another. That if the earth were the common heritage of all nations and all of the artificial boundaries removed that separate people, there would be no basis for war, no basis for armament. The world you live in is an old world. Its language is old. Its values are old. This is what the Venus Project advocates. The Venus Project is a design for culture in which we bridge the difference between all nations. How is that done? By a universal language, the blueprint. If you open a blueprint in Japan, they know what you're talking about. If you write a prescription for England, Japan, France, the pharmacologist understands that. There's no discrepancies. There's no ambivalence. I wonder what he meant by that. It's clear. The language we use daily is not. The language of warmth and love are verbal excuses and verbal outlets for some people for avoiding their responsibility to make the world a better place for everyone. The smarter your kids are, the richer my life. If you get a lump in your throat when you see hungry people, that's emotional. But when you increase the agricultural yield per acre, that's caring. That's love. Love is transforming all of the verbal and paper proclamations to a way of life. The shameful thing about our century is that there was only one Edison, one Louis Pasteur, one Nikola Tesla, one Madame Curie. We should have had thousands of them, and we will, once we get rid of the artificial boundaries that separate people, once we get rid of nationalism, patriotism. I do not mean to offend anybody. All that I ask you to do is think about this, toss it around. This is what the Venus Project advocates.